Here we go. Hi, Great School Voices, Love Better, and everybody in the community. Today we're having a wonderful interview with two wonderful guests and leaders from neighborhood charter schools. We have Jennifer Manning and we have Lindsay Malanga. So I'm just going to quickly read their bios and we will hop right in. Thank you, ladies, for joining me this morning. Okay, so first, we have Jennifer. Jennifer Manning is the Director of Special Populations at Neighborhood Charter Schools. She has worked with NCS since 2018 and helped to build out the special populations programming within the network. Jennifer has worked within education in New York City for the past 10 years. She has held different positions from teaching in self-contained and integrated classrooms to network leadership. She has a deep passion for ensuring that all students have access to a world-class education while also ensuring that their unique needs are met every day. Thank you, Jennifer, for joining us.
Thank you.
And then we have Lindsay. Lindsay Malanga is the current Executive Director of Neighborhood Charter Schools. With over 2 decades of experience in education, she has worked in underserved communities across New York City as a classroom teacher, dean of students, director of curriculum and instruction, and school principal. In 2011, Lindsay founded Harlem Prep, the first ever turnaround charter school of its kind in the country. She rose to take on the role of K through 12 superintendent at Democracy Prep Public Schools, overseeing the education of more than 5,000 students across 4 states. Additionally, she held the role of managing director of school support for its 4 schools in Brooklyn from 2018 to 2021. Lindsay earned her Bachelor's of Science degree from New York University in Early Childhood and Elementary Education in 2000 and a Master's in Education in School Leadership from Harvard in 2004. Lindsay lives in Manhattan with her 2 children, Lily and Jake, who attend New York City Department of Education middle schools. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Awesome. So we can hop into the questions. And I'll let you guys start. So I guess, Lindsay, we can start with you. As executive director, what would you like people to know about neighborhood charter schools, and particularly some of your programs like the Autism Spectrum Disorder program?
Yes. Well, I would want people to know that NTS is a very special place for students to learn and adults to work. We have a high bar for instruction, and our programming is designed to meet the needs of all of our students. Our special education population is 33% across our schools. About 15% of our students are on the autism spectrum. And we also have 15% of our students that are multi-language learners. 86% of our students are free and reduced lunch. And over 25% of our staff are going into their 5th year or beyond with this charter network, which has helped to solidify the excellence and expectations that we have here. So it's really both the design of our program and the quality of implementation that yield our student achievement results. And I'd love for Jen to talk about the ASD program.
Sure. I think what's really special about our ASD program is that we are fully integrated while also providing very specific supports to our students. So all of our classrooms function like ICT classrooms, which means there's 2 teachers in the classroom being able to provide support daily all the time to our kids. Our students within our ASD program are mixed with their neurotypical peers, but they're given really specific supports, and the co-teaching model allows students to get those supports. We also have something called Social Club that's really special within our program, where students are pulled out. Kindergarten students get it 5 days a week, and first grade and up students get Social Club 3 days a week. And in this club, they are learning with their speech language pathologists the social thinking curriculum, which teaches into social competencies and different strategies and tools that our kids can use to help them be successful both academically, but also in the world and beyond. And so in kindergarten, the curriculum is a little bit more focused on things like keeping your brain and your body in the group. And as kids get older, they start to learn tools about emotional regulation, being flexible with their thinking, and then even managing things like friendships and relationships as social situations get a lot more nuanced as students get older and they go into middle school and high school.
Got it. Thank you so much. It sounds like you guys do a lot every day. Um, so, what are some misconceptions people may have about the work you do at NCS, and particularly with the ASD program?
Yeah, I think that a misconception people probably have that we're a charter school with an ASD program is that we hold a different bar for students within the ASD program, which is definitely not true. We believe that all kids can achieve both socially, academically, and in the world. And we have that same bar for all of our kids. What we do believe is that getting there looks different for every kid. And so we put specific supports in place within the classroom, such as we have movement and sensory breaks. We utilize flexible seating. We utilize different co teaching models and different individualized supports for our kids. So their mastery of different things might look different and the supports they receive might look different, but the bar is the same. And I will say that academically speaking, most of our kids within our ASD program are outperforming our neurotypical general education students across the board, which is something that we're really proud of. And we want to keep facilitating our students being able to embrace their strengths and grow and thrive academically while also working on those social skills that come up within the classroom that enable them to learn in the group every day. And then I think another thing is probably that we're not fully integrated. Our school was founded and is based off of our ASD program. And so when we're planning different school events or we're planning classrooms, I'm always involved, or someone from my team is always involved with the planning of any school initiative or event to ensure that we're promoting inclusivity and we're thinking about our special populations when we're planning anything. And so every single thing within our school is integrated in the way that we want to make sure that all families, all students have access to the same things, regardless of their disability classification.
I think it's really interesting that you said NCS was sort of built out around the ASD program, where I feel like a lot of times in most regular schools, it's usually the school exists and then we're like, oh, we need these programs, so then we fit it in. Yeah, I think that's very interesting. Um, this question is for both of you, and we can start with you, Jennifer, since you're here. How did you get into special education? What drove you to get into this line of work?
I always knew I wanted to go into education, and after college, I decided to postpone teaching for a year, and I worked in a charter school helping with data and special education. And then after working in a school for a year, I kind of just knew that education and teaching, like my favorite part of my job was interacting with kids. And so I ended up being placed in an ICT classroom and then got my master's in special education and general education. And as I continued to work in ICT classrooms, and then I transitioned to working in 1211 classrooms, I was able to really, really see the impact that you can have on kids, not just academic growth, but their investment in school and learning, particularly teaching in a self-contained class, which means that every kid in the classroom has an IEP. They've likely had some negative schooling experience before getting to me. And I loved being able to transform that within kids of maybe things that teachers have told you before haven't worked and are the typical models of education and learning haven't worked, but we're going to figure out what does work for you so that we can reinvest you in trusting school and loving learning and knowing that you can achieve, even if that achievement and how you've gotten there looks different than the way the neurotypical peers have.
And Lindsay, what about you? What brings you to NCS and special education?
Well, in as I've said in my bio, I've had a long career across lots of different charter schools and networks. And one of the things that's always hard to get right is special education. I've seen it manifested in a lot of different ways, a lot of good intentions, but maybe not great impact. And so when the opportunity came to lead NCS, one of the things that drew me to it was already high quality programming. And so this is an opportunity for me in my leadership to take something from great to amazing, the next level. Typically, I had done a lot of turnaround work where you're going from the bottom up and really have to start with instruction being the first thing to fix in turnaround. Here at NCS, we really get to dive into the intricacies and start to tweak our practice with high levels of intentionality because that foundation is already set of high expectations and solid instruction. Um, so I've been really lucky to land here at this point in my career. And again, having seen a wide array of different manifestations of special education programming, I will say this is uh, the best design and implementation that I have seen to date.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Um, so I guess whenever we talk about neurotypical and neurodivergent, I think people think about many things. So how have the definitions of neurotypical and neurodivergent changed over the years?
I can take this one.
Sure.
I think a lot of changes have happened, and I feel like things were slowly changing, and now in the past few years, there's been a really big shift. One big change that's happened was the shift from just an autism diagnosis, and it used to be autism versus Asperger's. And Asperger's was typically more of like the socially acceptable version of autism, of what people would say, like, oh, like they're fine cognitively, but like they just have some social concerns or some social needs. And that changed a few years ago when they got rid of the diagnosis of Asperger's and it became autism spectrum disorder. Because really, it is a spectrum, and there are so many places in which people can land within that spectrum. I think there is still a bit of a stigma with the word autism and it meaning one specific thing, but trying to put a kid with autism in a box is impossible, right? There are so many different characteristics, it manifests in so many different ways. And we often see similar things with kids with the ASD diagnosis as the ADHD diagnosis, all within this neurodivergent category. And we also know that a lot of these different supports that we put into place for one diagnosis work for the other. And so I think it's really important that people stop trying to put neurodivergent or even neurotypical kids within a box and just think of them as different learners. Everybody learns in a different way, and there is no one cookie cutter way to teach children, whether they're neurotypical or neurodivergent, because everybody is different, everyone learns differently. I think another big shift is that we're moving away from different language. A big piece of language that used to be used a lot, and we even had used it before and we've stopped, is the word high functioning. High functioning is A, just can be an offensive term, and B, it's just not fully indicative of the child. And so we've been using words like lower or higher needs based upon what are the things that kids need within classrooms or social situations to help them build up those skills. Something that we really do that I think is really important is focusing on kids' strengths or people's
Mm-hmm.
strengths in the neurodivergent community. I think a lot of focus is often placed upon where their lagging skills are. And okay, they may, struggle to make eye contact or struggle to pick up on social cues. But what people are missing is oftentimes what comes with neurodivergence are these really extraordinary skills people who are really awesome at math or science or just have such deep level interests. I have kids who can tell you can ask them and drop them anywhere in the city and they can tell you any subway line, anywhere to go, no matter what. And it's like all because their brain works differently, and it's a strength that should be celebrated and shouldn't be just like toned down because it's not what is typically celebrated in society. And so I think we're moving towards it, just as in the world of like being able to embrace neurodivergence. But I think taking off the emphasis of that, of all of the things that are missing that people typically think are like socially acceptable, and really celebrating strengths is so important. And we're trying to do that as a school to help celebrate our neurodivergent community.
I really like that. Yeah, focusing on strengths. Because, yeah, I would say, I think often in education, and I think often just in the world, we tend to focus on the negative and where this person or thing falls short. Um, it's also really cool that you guys are saying higher and lower needs. Because honestly, whenever people would say high functioning to me, I'm like, I actually don't know what that means. Like,
Yeah.
no images like come to mind. I'm like, high functioning, I'm thinking of like I don't know, like a Bratz doll and she's like fabulous or something, but it doesn't really give me anything. I don't think of anything in terms of like how this person learns or what their needs are. So I think that just the language change is really good. A great step in the a good step in the right a great step in the right direction, I should say. Um, Lindsay, is there anything you want to add or
No, I think Jen explained it beautifully. Good.
cool?
Hmm.
Um, so New York City is diverse, has so many different walks of life, people from all over the world. Is there a need for more special education programs in New York City? And Lindsay, you can take this one.
Yes, it's a great question, and I thought about it a lot. And I think that, I would say that it's less about having more special education programs and more about what is the quality of these programs. Um, how are students' needs being met and by whom? How are we monitoring progress and using data to drive our support? How are adults held accountable for the achievement of our special education students? Um, I think, in New York City, we have to do a lot of our special education support through the Committee on Special Education, which is a large bureaucracy that, as you can imagine, does not move as quickly as the needs of our students. And so, where I think NCS really helps with that is we have the tools and resources and wherewithal to fill in those gaps while we're waiting for those proper services to come through. However, not every school does. And so there's no school I've ever been in that doesn't have special education teachers or some type of program that supports kids with IEPs. Of course, they all exist. But I think where we fall short in New York City and probably nationwide on trend is the quality, implementation, and accountability to those students in the ways that they truly deserve. And that's why I think NCS does shine, because we take those things so seriously, and you see the results in our kids, not just academically, but socially and emotionally as well as a result.
Right. I think that is key in terms of accountability. Um, so I guess in one way or in some ways, how do you guys make sure you are accountable to your students? Because at the end of the day, like, you know, your students are in your hands. So how do you make sure that everything you're doing for them, how do you stay accountable to your students?
Well, I'll start, and then I'd love for Jen to speak at a more granular level. But just number one, you have to start with leaders. How do we hold leaders accountable for clarity of vision, expectations, providing the people in their schools that do the work with the best conditions possible so that they can meet the needs of our students? That's what servant leadership is. And so I see my role as executive director very important in holding leaders accountable to a high bar of excellence so that we can put those levels of accountability for teachers and kids and achievement in place. But go ahead, Jen.
Yeah, I think something that we've learned, especially as we've grown as an organization, is that putting systems into place that are really based on data, which helps with that accountability piece. Because there's always going to be like a kid that stands out as like this kid is really struggling behaviorally or they're really struggling academically, and a teacher is going to fight for that kid. But there are some kids, if you're not looking at data, will fly under the radar. They're a little bit quieter. They're always, trying really hard in class, but they might need extra support and it's a little less obvious. And so we do a lot of studying of academic data, particularly through RTI, which is response to intervention, where we have universal screeners 3 times a year using important data that's based on standards to see which kids are falling below where they need to be at that point of the year. And then let's create targeted goals aligned with different interventions throughout the day and the week that teachers can be implementing to work towards kids meeting those goals. But it really helps with accountability because then there's check-ins around that data and around those goals. And then we redo it as the year goes on to ensure that kids aren't falling through the cracks academically because we're using data to ensure that that doesn't happen.
Got it. That makes sense. And I guess one thing I was curious about for folks who are watching this who may not know, NCS is in New York City, but specifically within Harlem and in the Bronx. Um, and obviously, we do know that those areas of the city tend to be more POC, people of color. So, what do you think makes NCS that much more important in the Bronx and in Harlem?
I mean, personally, particularly when we're talking about special populations, there's a lot of disenfranchisement that's happened within these communities, within schools. And so oftentimes kids are over referred, but then don't get services that they need. So people of color in particular will be over referred before those tier 1, tier 2 supports are put into a classroom. And like to ensure that kids actually do need special education supports, because while we do always want to give kids what they need, we don't want to give kids too restrictive of an environment, which sometimes can happen, particularly in the public school system. And so we're very careful about who we're referring and why to ensure that kids are getting what they need, but we're not over referring in that way, so that our kids are able to have access and to be able to be successful beyond when they leave our school.
Yeah, and just to add one little quick thing to that, I would say our students, whether they be special education, multi-language learner, whatever tag they may have, the thing that NCS is doing is proving that that doesn't define your success. That you can be just as successful, if not more, than someone without those labels. So that's a really wonderful thing that I think we are cultivating in the community, that it shouldn't have the negative stigma. It's okay to get what you need, and you can be a huge success.
Snaps for that.
Mm-hmm.
So I also wanted to know, besides learning in the classroom, how does family and family support come into play with your students?
Yes. I mean, we are very proud of our family engagement, and it's growing, which is great. We have active parent associations at both of our schools that partner with the school to fundraise, promote good learning habits, readathons, put on events for our students, just overall enhance the quality of education that our kids are getting. Our PA presidents are actually members of our board of trustees. So they also have a seat on our board, and they hold me accountable and ask me questions, and they know the ins and outs of what's going on in our school because they do have those seats. Also, we make sure that our leaders, even myself, host coffee and conversations regularly with families so they can come, ask whatever questions, surface concerns, give ideas. So we try to create a lot of different spaces for us to interact with each other, because family engagement is different for every family and how they can lean in and what that means for them. So we're really proud of how we've diversified access and partnership with our families. Also, and Jen can speak to this, we do specific family support for our ASD families. So I'll let her speak a little bit to that.
Yeah, we one big thing that we do that is in the beginning of a family entering into our ASD program is that in August, before that student comes to our school for the first time, we do a home visit, which is now virtual, which makes our lives a little easier, where we've already reviewed all those students' documents, they've been accepted to the program, but it's really a chance for parents to be able to talk about what are the goals that they have for their child within academically and socially. What are things that the family wants us to know before their kid steps into our classroom for the first time? And it just gives a way to open up that conversation and that relationship with families from the start. And then from there, we do some other big things to support our families, particularly within our ASD program. So we have a monthly ASD family support group. And the way that these typically run are we pick a topic that we think is relevant for that time of year. So sometimes it's around, having gotten the diagnosis. Sometimes it's around anxiety. Sometimes it's around structure and routine and how to build that in the home. And then instead of us as school leaders leading it, we facilitate, but we have parent speakers lead it. So parents within our program talk around their experience around the topic. They give advice, they give resources, but it's also then opens up to everyone else on the call, because we do it over Zoom to make it more accessible, to be able to share their own experiences, ask questions for each other, build community, which is so important because it is a really specific thing having a child on the autism spectrum. And not every family that we have has people that they can relate to and talk through different things as they're happening and get resources from. And so we started it during the pandemic, but we plan to continue it forever because we've just gotten such positive feedback from families. And honestly, I learn a lot when I get to sit in those groups, because it's really just family supporting each other. And it's one of my favorite times of the month. Some other things we do are we will do events for families too as they come up. One thing we do every year is a sensory friendly Santa. Something that neurotypical people wouldn't always realize is seeing Santa and getting to sit on Santa's lap during Christmas time is a really sensory overload experience. Often you're often in a crowded place with a lot of noise, there's music, there's bells. And a lot of our kids struggle in that environment. And so we've had various people, members of our community, dress up as Santa, and we do a whole event around it. But Santa is in a quiet space, there's no lighting, and kids get to have that experience without the families worrying about my kid, having a meltdown or having a lot of anxiety by all the things that are around them. So we're always looking to do new events like that, where we're helping our kids and families have the neurotypical experience without all of the sensory and other considerations that people wouldn't always think about.
That is so interesting. Yeah, I would have never thought of that. That's very interesting. Um, yeah, I definitely remember just I never really liked Santa, but I enjoyed Christmas time. I enjoyed, the hustle and bustle of it all, but that's very cool. Um, I also wanted to know, we had talked about this before, but so what kind of curriculum does NCS use, and how does it differ from ones found in traditional schools?
Yes. So for the most part, NCS has a homegrown curriculum.
Hmm.
We have definitely drawn from a variety of resources to develop our programming, but ultimately we have program directors like Jennifer as the director of special populations. We have a director of ELA, math, science, and history for every content area that designs scopes and sequences, units of study, And then there's curriculum coordinators that coach the teachers in the content delivery. So the expectations that we set for our students within our curricular documents are higher than grade level expectations many times. Our program directors work very closely to align learning experiences across the subjects to allow for cross-curricular connections in a coherent and cohesive way. We've infused the hallmarks of ethnic studies into our curriculum, which serves as our means of supporting our commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. We also promote our light values, which are the basis of our social emotional learning program. And we ensure that students have a wide variety of non-academic experiences through their programming, like art, PE, music, dance. We'll also next year we're making a robust electives program in our middle school, and also expanding after school opportunities to let kids find their passion. So we really think about curriculum as serving the entire child and not just the typical subjects or the state standards that we get. We really push beyond those limits. And another initiative that we're seeking to codify and even build further capacity in, because we've been doing it, of course, is differentiation. So now every single unit of study that teachers receive have differentiation techniques for content, product, and process. And so they can really think about what they're doing in the classroom to meet the needs of all students, and that's just kind of baked in. Jen, is there anything else you would add about our curriculum?
I don't think. I think you covered everything curriculum wise.
Got it. And I know we've been talking a lot about the ASD program. What are some of the other education programs that are within NCS?
Sure. So I think we've already mentioned this, but it's important to
Mhm.
note that every single one of our classrooms is an ICT classroom. So there are two teachers within every single classroom. And so typically, two of those classrooms are designated as our ASD specific classrooms. And almost always, the students within those classrooms who have IEPs are students within the ASD program. But we have a third classroom per grade that functions a bit more like your traditional ICT classroom. And we have students with varying other disabilities, such as speech language impairment, learning disabilities, other health impairment. And so they're receiving differentiated instruction, small group instruction, and just general special education supports throughout the day. However, we have noted that throughout the years, there are kids who just need a bit more support than ICT. And so we have a program called the Bridge Program, and it's pretty unique, but it functions similarly to the way a 12-1 classroom would function. And so students are getting support within the Bridge classroom up to 3 times per day with our bridge teachers in a group no larger than 12. So they still are in their ICT homeroom, and they're still exposed to grade level standards throughout the day. There's certain classes that we know that they'll never miss for bridge, such as math workshop, where they're getting specific grade level math that they wouldn't get exposed to if they had missed it. So, but something like guided reading, they're going to get it in their bridge classroom because it's going to be a bit more differentiated, and they're going to work on foundational skills that they may be missing. So we may have fourth or fifth graders doing phonics, which in our typical curriculum, students have moved on by second grade and they're not really getting phonics instruction. They may need more phonics, more counting, building number sense, so that they're able to start to be able to access what's happening in their grade level classroom. We've also found that not only does our bridge program help our kids academically, because it does, but it really helps with social emotional with those kids. Oftentimes, those kids have really struggled in school. No matter what support they've gotten from their teachers or how like loving and inclusive environment that's been given to them, kids are really intuitive and they know when school feels hard for them. They know when reading or math feels hard for them. And it does start to eat away at kids' confidence levels and their love of school. It's hard to love something that feels hard for you all the time. And so with Bridge, we've seen students be able to achieve success a lot more often within the Bridge program, which builds up their confidence and reinstills a love for school and a want to learn and keep trying, because they're able to get curriculum that they are able to access, and then they can start to feel more and more successful. So it's something that, I'm particularly really proud of. It's a program that's very near and dear to my heart as someone who's taught in 12-1 classrooms before. And just being able to see the growth from our kids in that program is really, really special.
Yeah, and we should probably talk a little bit more about the social thinking curriculum that we use in Social Club, because that is part of what we think is like our secret sauce to making great things happen for kids. And while it is just inside of our ASD Social Club specifically, it does permeate, that type of language and thinking permeates throughout the entire school. So, Jen, you want to talk a little bit more about that? I think that's an important piece as well.
Sure. Yeah, so we utilize the social thinking curriculum instead of teaching social skills. It teaches social competencies. So it teaches our kids to be able to use different tools to navigate through social and academic situations. So examples of things that kids are learning when they're in social club in kindergarten are like how to put my brain in the group. I'm not looking at you, and my teacher is going to always tell me to think about me with your eyes, because it cues kids in to realize that the neurotypical world, when you're looking at something, that's what your brain is thinking about. And so we cue kids in with things like, think about me, catch my message. I'm about to tell you the group plan that's going to be really important for you to know. And then we teach into things like body in the group. What does it look like for our body to be ready to learn and ready to focus on what's happening right now? And then as they get older, that expands a bit more. So we utilize like, think with your eyes. What do I know? What am I noticing about this situation? What's in my people files about my teacher? I know my teacher doesn't like it when I just call out. So I'm going to make sure I raise my hand before I say something, because that's what I know about her. We also utilize a lot of different tools around perspective taking. We'll often draw out situations, particularly if there's a conflict for a kid, and we'll draw out the kid with a thought bubble. What was that person? What were you thinking? Okay. And then you ripped a toy out of a kid's hand. What do you think that person was thinking? And we'll draw out the thought bubble, and things like that. Dynamic visuals is what we call them, or enable our kids to be able to really visualize what's happening in the situation and visualize the thoughts and feelings of others, which is really important because that skill often doesn't come as naturally to our neurodivergent population. And then as kids get older, we start working on things that are a bit more complex. Flexible thinking is a really big one, especially as academics tend to get a bit harder. We call it rock brain when kids get really stuck on something. It's like they don't know the answer to a question. It's very difficult for them a lot of kids to move on and skip it, or take a deep breath and get a drink of water. So teaching kids to be able to recognize when they're being inflexible or having rock brain, but then also supplementing that with tools that kids can use to help with their own emotional regulation. Because what we can't do is stop people from getting upset, right? And that's never our goal. Kids are going to be upset, adults are going to be upset. But what are the tools that we can give kids to be able to navigate being upset in a way that feels a little bit more expected? And then as kids get even older, we delve into topics that are even more complex. We utilize a friendship pyramid and a relationship pyramid in social club, where this person I sit next to every day in class, but we say hello and then we never really talk. That's not really a close friend, right? That's not something I'm going to divulge all of my secrets to, right? They don't necessarily want to talk to me every day online. They may just want to say hi to me. And then like it goes up in the friendship period. What does it mean for someone to be a close friend? What does it mean for someone to be a best friend? And then what is expected behavior throughout those things because it's so nuanced, and a lot of our students don't understand that nuance. And it does come into play within the academics of the classroom, but we also see this play out a lot more. There are times that are non-academic within our school, lunch and recess, specials, and we're really able to have kids practice these strategies during those times that are a little less academic and a little less structured. And I think, as Lindsay mentioned, our teachers are able to observe social club once a week so that they can see what our speech language pathologists are working on with those kids at the time. And then they can help then generalize those skills when they go into the classroom. Because oftentimes our kids in social club in isolation can recognize different situations of, yeah, I was being a stuck thinker during that time. But when they're in the moment and it's in the classroom and actually happening, it becomes a lot more difficult to be able to apply and generalize those skills.
Got it. I think if every adult had access to NCS teaching as a kid, I think we'd be better adults in a better world, honestly. Ooh, so
Agreed.
so my last question, well, I don't know if you guys want to answer this because I think you already answered it, but how is NCS redefining what a high achieving student looks like? I think you guys have answered it throughout, unless you guys want to add anything more.
Yeah, I mean, I would just like to stamp that it's really about leaning into the whole child. It's not just the test scores, even though in the charter world, we know that that's what we're held accountable to. NCS really cares about that and all beyond. So we work hard to develop a culture where students support each other and
Mm-hmm.
embrace differences. We take pride in giving our students opportunities to perform and share their voices and talents in a variety of ways. So high achieving for us really means students are well-rounded, they're confident, and they're equipped with the knowledge and skills to navigate the complex world.
Gotcha.
Mhm.
So my last question is, what for the both of you, what has been the best day at NCS thus far? And we can start with you, Lindsay.
Oh, that's so hard.
I'm sure
Um,
there's many.
there are many, and what I will say is this has been my first year that I've just completed here, so it's been quite the ride. And this year was the first year that the school came back in person, so
Mm-hmm.
it was great. But a day that stands out to me is a day that we held a community conversation, and we did this in December. And it was really about, as we've come back from the pandemic, as now, I'm here as your new leader. We wanted to hear from all stakeholders, from students, teachers, staff, leaders, board members, parents. They all came together to talk about what do we want next for NCS? How are we going to make us even greater? What are the things you desire and which direction should we go? So from that conversation, which just felt so great because we were all on the same page and you could hear the desires of people across stakeholders and our shared vision for excellence for our kids. Um, from that conversation, that generated a lot of the shifts we will make for 22-23. So I really just appreciate that level of community engagement that's driving change. So that was a really special day.
I think it's very difficult to choose just one day. But I do think the day that sticks out to me the most is last spring, we did come back in person for a very small subset of kids. And it was mostly students within our ASD program and students with other disability classifications, because those were the students who, as you can imagine, just struggled the most learning online and remotely. So we did a lot of work and a lot of planning to make it so that kids could come back in person 4 days a week. It was just from the middle of April until the end of June. But I think the best part about that was not only just getting to see kids in person again, but seeing kids just be so excited to be back in school. And I think that speaks to the program that we've built, that students were no longer happy to be learning at home, which I feel like is probably what, like, on a TV show, like all kids are, are trying to get out of school and like they would love to be on their computer and learning every day. And our kids were just like so thrilled to be learning in person, putting pen to paper, and just seeing their teachers in person. Which it was just a really magical day.
That's awesome. Well, I think that wraps it up for us. Any last words before we go?
NCS is such a tremendous school, and we would invite any educators that want to learn more about how to do special education and education in general at a high level to come learn from us, because we want to help all kids.
Awesome. Are there any socials or any websites, anything? How can folks get in contact with you?
ncschools.org is our website.
Mhm.
We do have social media platforms, but I would say they're a little bit dormant right now. But look out in the fall for more. But our website is really the place to go.
Got it.
Mhm.
Cool. Thank you, ladies. Thank you for joining me and having this wonderful, robust conversation. I learned a lot, and I know that everyone who will watch this will as well.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Ira.
So I'm going to end the broadcast, but hang on one moment.
Thank you.